So it has to do with the biological enhancement of radiotherapy. And why should we talk about it? We saw this morning some fantastic presentation. Thank you for all the head of department who presented. That show that in the Middle East is broad. And Mokhtar, are you here? Mokhtar, last year you were complaining that Libya was not part of Middle East, but you see I attach this time. Yeah, I see that you're happy. Now you back to Middle East. Thank you very much. So we also put our friends from Kerala, if they want to be part of Middle East. And Jam, I'm waiting for your complaint to know if you want to be part of Middle East, then we can extend. But somewhere, we're going to wrap up the word. What do you say? The what? Like that. It was too loud. Okay, perfect. So we have a lot of inhabitants in Middle East, and the majority we saw are young. So one of the consequences is we have much less cancer, but we tend to have aggressive one. When I see a breast patient, for example, she tends to be triple negative, already a locally advanced breast cancer. So after 3 months working in the Middle East, because I arrived working with Zahid in Oman, I thought that if really we should focus on something in the Middle East in terms of research, be about more aggressive local regional treatments, because we have those patients who tend to recur more often, but also because many of those patients tend to be metastatic, we have to leverage the systemic effect of radiotherapy. And so I would like to address those two topics, some seeds, and maybe some youngster and some PhDs would like to develop that. And because Pierre, you were very kind to come here, you're from Lund University, we know that we're already discussing about some of those research. So what about the more aggressive local regional treatments? Yeah, radiation is good. We talk about SBRT, but is there anything else we can do? What about getting back to a very good old idea, which is hyperthermia? So hyperthermia was evaluated for many, many years, and I'm showing here one of the friends I was talking about is Professor Riyadh van Roon. He's literally we should say the Pope, I don't know if you should say that here, but he's really the guy who knows everything about hyperthermia. He was a president of the Hyperthermia Society, and he's a guy who knows everything from the electromagnetic wave down to the clinical. And he contributed to this publication in 2000 in the Lancet, where they pulled out patients with advanced pelvic disease, like it was majoritarily some gynae patients. And they were able to show that if you do radiotherapy plus hyperthermia, the survival is 51%, but without hyperthermia, it was only 27%, published in the Lancet. So that triggers something. We don't have a lot of good evidence for hyperthermia, but this one is a very strong one. That it's practical. You see here an application for hyperthermia. It's a complex machine. You have to put the patient for hours behind this sort of transducer. There's a lot of issue because if you have a good blood flow, then you don't get the temperature. It's very sensitive. You have to be between 41 to 42.5, and it's not an easy one. But there's also another challenge for hyperthermia, and I think this is the biggest one. It's like when you apply the hyperthermia before the radiation or after, you just have a very narrow window where you get the enhancement. Here you see the thermal enhancement ratio, the TER. And you see that if you give it within plus or minus 30 minutes, then you have a huge enhancement. But if you go more than 80 minutes, you almost get no enhancement. And there was, again, this publication from Van Leeuwen, so another Dutch, because in Netherlands and in Germany, they use a lot of hyperthermia, where out of 58 patients, they look at the patients that were within the 80 minutes, like within an hour and a half of hyperthermia or beyond that. Local recurrence was 18% when you were within this window versus 53%. It's huge. And the overall survival, of course, was exactly the opposite, meaning if you are within the minutes, you have half of the patients who survive versus only 17%. And that's a challenge because honestly, in Rotterdam, we had hyperthermia. You put your patient in the room, you put the transducer, now you have to take the patient, to remove everything, to go to the radiation machine, to give the radiation treatment. It's challenging, and that's something that doesn't work. But let's go back to the thing. I had another friend who was really interested, Roland Canard. He's a guy he became the head of the genetic unit and radiology biology and genetic unit And he was interested about the mechanism of hyperthermia. And I think that if we can go to the mechanism, when we understand the mechanism, that's when we can start to say, hey, that's how we should design a clinical application. So Roland is a specialist of DNA repair. And DNA repair, you have tons of mechanisms. You have the single strand break, which repair very quickly, and you have a double strand break. And his specialty is homologous recombination, meaning how do you repair double strand break? And what he showed, and you can see here on this graph, is when you create a double strand break, initially you have some enzyme, nuclease, helicase, that's gonna clean a little bit the DNA. And then that's under the two gene, actually, so RAD51 and BRCA2. Now you can see that we have something like the triple negative, which is going to pilot the homologous pairing. And basically what it does, you have, because you have two chromosomes, there's a piece of one of the strand that's going to overlap, and then you're going to repair and exactly replicate. It's a very subtle mechanism. So what is the finding of Canard? What Canard found is that hyperthermia impacts the DNA repair by homologous recombination. So on this slide, you see some cells. What is red is a gamma H2X immunohistochemistry, meaning gamma H2X going to link where you have a double strand break. So every dot is a double strand break. At 37 degrees, you see that the immunohistochemistry linking to BRCA, you overlap double strand break and BRCA. The protein are together. RAD51 is the same thing. When you go to 41 degrees, both the BRCA1 protein and the RAD51 protein does not go. There's no repair. This is a proof that hyperthermia affects double strand break. But which one is one? So here you have some Western blots. Western is protein, Northern is DNA, Southern is ARN, so RNA. So Western blot here, you see that at 37 degrees, RAD51 is intact. Why laughing? It's true. BRCA1, on the other hand, is affected, which means that, in fact, it's not RAD51 which is affected, but hyperthermia make your patient to be BRCA1 negative. And so you don't have the repair of autologous recombination. I find that fascinating. But also what he found, he looked at how fast do you recover from hyperthermia. And over time, you see that the Western blot is negative for BRCA1, but you will recover within 5 hours. And that's exactly the explanation of this impact of delay for hyperthermia. So in fact, now we have to think about DNA repair. Hyperthermia limits the repetition of double strand break. How can we use this discovery for clinical benefits? And here's a couple of ideas that we start to work on when I was a little. The first is we do with proton therapy. When you do proton therapy, there is an RPE of 1.1. What does that mean, 0.1? What is that exactly? In fact, it has to do with something which is well known in radiobiology. It's a intensity of dose that you deposit along the track, what you call the linear energy transfer. If you look at carbon ions, for example, they're extraordinarily densely ionizing. You will have a lot of damage along the track, and you will have a lot of double strand break, more efficient double strand break. When you look at proton, it's 1.1. It's a bit less. But the 0.1 might mean that you have more, George, I'm sure that you like that, because that was your PhD thesis. You might have more double strand break that you could potentially potentiate. So a research we have done, but I don't think that they have pursued, was to say, is there a way we could, on our all-on PTC that we built on the proton therapy machine, have on top of that an hyperthermia? And could we, with hyperthermia, shift proton to sort of pseudo-carbon ion? So that was a very exciting project. And that's something that maybe in Saudi you may consider, because you have proton therapy. Another one that was fascinating, and we reached the patient stage, like we had some patients that were treated this way. When you give radiation, the majority of damage are through single strand break. And if you have a single strand break in a cell that divides, at the time of replication of the DNA, you're going to eventually create a double strand break. But this double strand break is immediately prevented by PARP, which is poly-ADP ribose polymerase, which immediately stick to the single-strand break and help to repair. So when the cell enters into division, everything is fine. Now, we have some molecules that our colleagues in chemotherapy are using, which is PARP inhibitor. So what if, when you have a single-strand break, you use PARP inhibitor? Well, PARP inhibitor will create a double-strand break. So PARP inhibitor creates a double-strand break. But that, again, is repaired by autologous recombination. So what if we use on top of that hyperthermia? Then there's no repair. And so the idea that they had, and they started in medical oncology to do that, was to say, let's treat a patient with radiation, hyperthermia, and add just PARP inhibitors. They started, they got caught into a lot of ethic application and things like that. But I think the idea was fascinating. It's so simple. Can we increase the efficiency of our treatment? Radiation, hyperthermia, and PARP inhibitors. It's not rocket science. There's another application on which I hope the guy who's talking at the back, Nadim Pervez, is listening now. You might be interested because we talk about it. If you really want to treat the patient fast and having an increase of double-strand break or more efficient single-strand break, this is brachytherapy. And Saad, I think we talk about that too, right? Yeah, of course, I'm going to design here. And HDR is an application where you give a huge amount of dose into the tumor at a given time. There's also on the market some radiofrequency applicator that can apply some hyperthermia. And so with my friend Riyadh Borroun, that's his slide actually. That was his plan, is to say, well, we have HDR brachytherapy. For example, prostate, you will have the urethra in the middle and you will have some damage and you're stuck because there's a rectum close by. You could potentially add a map of thermal enhancement ratio. You could put some cold liquid into the urethra and you could add some applicator, some generator in the tumor, avoiding the rectum. You could also put some ice in the rectum, some cold in the rectum. And the biological effect will be this one. I think that for prostate and cervix, the people who do brachytherapy, there's here some very simple potential to the research. So that might, very simply, especially because the cervix is really a cancer which is very frequent, may help to enhance. So those were the work by Ronald Canard and Riyadh. Second question. Can we leverage the systemic effect of radiotherapy? And here, I would like to talk about the abscopal. And that's something that I started to work when I was during 2 years at Accurate. What is the abscopal effect? So if there's some biology here, please forgive my simplification. But basically, the cancer is a foreign body. And normally your T cell, and especially the dendritic cell, should recognize them as a foreign body and should throw a cascade of immune response and the natural killer to really destroy the cancer. But the cancer is smart. There's a major histocompatible complex, the H, who have something and say, no, I'm still a human being. So you have this checkpoint that say, no, you cannot destroy the tumor. And that inhibit, and that's how you can develop a kilogram of tumor that is going to kill you without having an immune reaction. So if we give radiation in a bit of a different way, instead of giving 2 gray per fraction, they're going to kill the cell by clonogenic death. I induce some damage in the DNA. It's after several divisions that I'm going to kill the cell. I give SBRT, super high dose per fraction. I'm going to go in a killing of the cell through dissolving the organelle. I'm going to release a lot of antigen. And then there's been a question, when we do SBRT, is it possible that we can overwhelm the checkpoint and really develop some sort of immune response? And there's a couple of evidence about that. The first, although David Palma declined that, it's a Canadian study, our friend David Palma, so he's from London, Ontario. He did the COMET study, the Canadian COMET study. 66 patients with a maximum of 5 oligomets. So those patients that had a primary cancer treated, control, and then developed oligometastasis. So it was all sorts of tumor sites like breast, colorectal, lung, prostate, and others. And he either give them best supportive care, treating only when there's a symptom or when there's a risk, or immediately SBRT. And you see the 2 curves, and I find that fascinating. At the beginning, really the first year, the SABR arm was slightly worse in terms of overall survival. But rapidly, you see the two curves changing. What I find absolutely fascinating is the second curve, the progression-free survival. You see that after 4 years, there's a plateau. We can see plateau like that in breast cancer that are hormone sensitive, or prostate cancer that are also responding to hormone. But still, having a plateau in a story like that is very unseen, especially because the other ones are just going to zero. And that's highly significant. So David believed that it's the aggressivity of the treatment. Those patients may recur later on, but after 8 years, I start to have some doubt. I think we can reasonably question either an abscopal effect here. There's some other evidence, and the evidence were published 3 years ago in the Lancet. It's a pooled analysis of 2 studies that were using SBRT for non-small cell lung cancer with or without pembrolizumab, because checkpoint inhibitor could be added to the strategy to amplify the abscopal effect. And you can see that in both cases, you can have a better progression-free survival. I can give you the slide if you want to compare. Okay, or you want to take it? But also you improve the overall survival. So I think this is sort of, okay, we have something here. And for the patient, we tend to see that this maybe because we have access to pembrolizumab, we have access to SBRT, maybe there's something we can do here. Another evidence which I find fascinating, this is work from MD Anderson, James Welch. James Welch is a funny guy, like he speaks a lot, he's very passionate about what he did. And he reviewed about 1,000 cases that has had SBRT. And he found a couple of very intriguing stories. So here, for example, is lung mets of an hepatocarcinoma cellular that he treated with super high dose, 50 Gray 4 fraction, with ipilimumab, which is another checkpoint inhibitor. And you see here the tumor that has been treated and disappeared. There's now a huge lesion in the low dose area, which has completely disappeared. But now you have another lesion way far away that has no dose, it didn't change. So he developed the concept of a radscopal strategy. He said that you have some cancer, you give a very high dose, you destroy by SBRT and the organelle. Then you have some area that has a sort of cork of T cell, and this will prevent the abscopal effect to work. And you give a very low dose from 0.5 to 2 Gray there. And by stimulating the microenvironment, by creating some inflammation, you will pull a lot of T cell, and that's how. But if you're too far away, then you can't. And of course, because he's an American person, he patented the ID, so it's radscopal TM. I don't know if you're going to make money out of it, but there's a certain philosophy here instead of publishing and making it open source. So now the real question is, how can you use that clinically? Because, okay, I think it's a great idea. I could treat certain lesion, maybe low dose there, but how do I know the infiltration of T cell? Because I need to give 2 Gray to a lesion that may have a little bit of T cell around that has a hard time. I may need to give a very high dose to a metastasis that has no T cell infiltration, and I should not touch any metastasis that has already a lot of infiltration of T cell. And this is another, I believe, great invention from Eric Dutch. When I was at Gustave Roussy, he was a resident, but already super brilliant. I don't know if you know him, very brilliant guy. He's a radiobiologist. And this guy, what he has done, he has created some radiomic signature of T cell infiltration. So you have genomics. I look at the gene expression and I can classify my patient. You have proteomic. I look at protein expressed in the blood and I classify my patient. Metabolomic. Again, I look at all the expression, I can classify. Radionics. I take a CT scan, I take every voxel, level of Gray, 1 signature. What is the level of Gray of the thing around, second signature, third, fractal? I can, for every voxel in a CT scan, get up to 250 signature. Meaning if I get a CT scan of the patient, I could start to classify my patient. And so using those signatures, he has been able to correlate the infiltration of T cell with a specific signature. You see on the top left, a patient with a tumor, and he has a lot of T cell. The radiomic signature is 1.37. Below, another head and neck patient, very few, lower radiomic signature. A lung metastasis, a lot of CA plus, radiomic signature 2.11. So that means that by just doing a CT scan, we could say, oh, this metastasis has a lot of T cell and not. So he told me after that, I've been very bad. I took one of my residents, and residents here, you know, they only want to suffer. He took one of his residents and he looked at 30 patients and he asked him to contour every single metastasis. And he applied the radiomic signature. And I found that absolutely fascinating. He showed what we all knew a long time ago, is that every single metastasis nest is not the same biology than the primary. But you can see that here, he can tell you that this one has a lot of T-cell infiltration. Maybe I should not touch to it. This one has some, but maybe I need to remove the cork, maybe too gray. This one has no infiltration, I need to blast it. That means that us as radiation oncologists, you as medical physicists, we could potentially, after the CT scan, start to say, okay, let's be strategic here. I have an oligometastatic patient. I'm going to give a high dose here, a low dose here. And I think those, again, are, we pretty much have to reach, right? I mean, we can easily do it. You know, with the CT scan, you know, you have a lot of radiomic software that are open source, again, so I'm careful. Zahid, you look at the installation at certain campus, so we can start to do this kind of work. And then let's start to give different doses, and let's be innovator, and let's be leader in the field. So in conclusion of this talk about what kind of research, what kind of vision we could have for the Middle East, I would say that cancer are different here. And we also saw this morning, everybody presenting younger patient, more aggressive disease. And the vision for our R&D should be different than the one that they are in the US or in Europe, because they are very different cancer. You know, they look, the control is good, they look at side effect, they look at long-term outcome. I think that more anywhere else, there's a great potential to combine the biology. And the good news is that there's a lot of pharma companies that are coming with new drugs, which we potentially associate with. Thank you very much.